Britain, the most multicultural nation in the world. According to national government figures, there are over 64 million people in Britain, and the most recent UK census revealed that almost 5% of the population are of South Asian descent. The home to some of the best football stadiums and grounds on the planet, the Premier League consists of over 4,000 professional players, but surprisingly, only 4 British Asians have made it to play at top flight level. This subject matter has been of great discussion for many decades. Media City UK is the base of BBC Sport HQ and the workplace of sports journalist Nathan Middleton.
My dissertation was a geography dissertation, but it was looking at social geographies in terms of the lack of British Asian representation in English football. I did this because, the British Asian population in England is very well established on the 4th, 5th generation, and I couldn't understand why in 2009 at the time there were only 6 professional English footballers. It's the national game. I didn't really understand why there was such a lack of progression, whether it be in terms of stereotypical views within the game, where it was a lack of wanting to engage in football. And I found some really interesting things. There was no one definitive reason as to why. The game itself, from academia written and people who study the subject of British Asian football, they seem to think that it was more to do with the preconceived conceptions of what British Asians can bring to the game, whether that be in terms of a lack of physicality, whether it was in terms of not trying to engage in football. But having spoke to coaches, having spoke to former players and a couple of the lads, it was Sash, Raymond and Anwar Udan and Adnan Ahmed as well, who'd been at Manchester United, they all said that it was hugely partly down to the drive from their parents and the drive from themselves, and if you had the opportunities and you wanted to make it, there was a pathway there.
It is often suggested, and many would argue, that the traditional Asian diet is a contributing factor as to why Asians do not progress to play football professionally.
Nutrition for sports people, athletes, for example, footballers, is very important in terms of the performance, like for any individual, in terms of how they're going to fuel themselves for that activity. So if it's football, then people need to consider how strong they're going to be, how fast they're going to be, what their body composition is, how well they're going to recover after a sporting event. And their training schedules tend to be really rigorous as well, without much time to rest and recuperate. So nutrition can play a really important part in all of those different aspects. Typical Asian diets tend to be high in vegetable-based oils, like vegetable oil, corn oil, sunflower oil. All of these things can be pro-inflammatory and not a healthful source of oils. A much better alternative would be using, and what many Asian diets already use, are fats such as ghee or butter or coconut oil. Coconut oil is an amazing nutrient, an amazing oil. It's converted to energy much more readily than a lot of the other fats are. It's anti-inflammatory also. And it can be cooked to a high heat, so a lot of Asian diets would use vegetable oils to maybe fry foods, but you can do the same with coconut oil because it can be heated to a high temperature and still be safe at a molecular level.
The UMIX Centre is situated at the heart of Sheffield City and accommodates the anti-racism organisation FIRD, which tackles racist incidents that are sadly related to the beautiful game.
Can racism be a barrier to Asians' involvement in football? Yes, very much so. And I think football still has a long way to go in terms of how the establishment perceives Asian, particularly sort of English-born Asian players. And I think that's evident if you look at the professional game in England and the lack of Asian-born English players that have progressed through the professional leagues. I think that you can count on one hand the amount of players that have made it from those communities, from Asian communities based in England. And I think a lot of that is the perception of the professional game, perception of clubs with regards to Asians, and whether or not they perceive them as being the old school thinking was largely about them not being physically up or having the physical attributes to be able to compete in elite football. I think a lot of that has been shut down by by Asians progressing in different sports. I mean, boxing, for instance, is one of the most physically demanding sports around, and there's a number of Asian boxers that have progressed and excelled in that field, which kind of shoots down the physical thinking that football has in relation to Asians not being able to cut it, as they say. So I think there's a long way to go in relation to developing links with Asian communities, developing progression routes for Asian players into the professional game, and I think football needs to look at itself and look at how it perceives Asian players and the Asian communities in general.
The diverse British Asian community consists of various religious groups, many of which practice faiths such as Islam and Christianity. Religious obligations are seen to be potential barriers for progression in the sport of football.
Religion, it can sometimes have an impact on football for Asians, not even Asians, I mean any culture, any religions. I think that for Christians, I'm a Christian myself, and if you're joining like a Sunday league club, it could have a big impact, because say for instance you're doing ministry in church, so like you're a worship leader or you sing songs, and I think if you play for a club and they want you to turn up to the match, you'll be like, no, I can't turn up, I've got church, and that can have a big impact. And say for instance that on that match there's a scout there, and you've missed your chance.
The FA is aware of many obstacles surrounding Asian participation. It has set up talent ID days nationally to engage with the Asian community, to build bridges and to help Asians progress from grassroots level to higher league level.
Where I scout in West Yorkshire, there's not that many where I look after, but when I go into the likes of Bradford, there's a lot of players there, but again it's hesitant because the parents don't want to know. They don't want to travel all the way over to Liverpool with their kid. They're thinking it's a waste of time where they could help in the family business or other high paid jobs, but it's one of them where we try to, it's an obstacle which we're trying to, come across and go over, get it out of the way, and, if we talk to the parents, tell them what it is from the word go. There is some players, I've sent a few players from the Asian side, and they're still there at Liverpool, and some have gone to Man City, Man United, but still, at least they're still coming into these clubs where the parents are coming, out of the shells and putting the kids forward and supporting them. That's a big thing, the support, which I think days like today, the talent ID, the FA need to help support, Asians and getting into that football, giving them from the word go all the way up to where it ends up being a professional football, hopefully in the near future.
Former Huddersfield Town footballer Jamil Nawaz has set up J3 Academy in an effort to help increase aspiring young Asian footballers to participate in the sport.
The whole idea of my aim was to get everybody to sort of break that barrier, get every culture, race, religion to play together with a love of football, because I love football that much. I've got them to sort of say, look, ignore all that, let's play football, let's coach. I come out, I've got a couple of centres now that I've set up. I've got a massive amount of numbers right now and hoping to still to grow, over 60 to 70 kids attending per session from the ages of 6, as parents who have turned up and said, my child's 5 years old, and it's quite overwhelming looking and thinking 5 years old, the mentality of parents now compared to the mentality of my age group of parents was different. Like Asian footballs, most parents tend to say to them, right, you've got to be a doctor, you've got to be this, you've got to be that, because they've not seen the success in football and sports activities with Asians. So I wanted to change that. I wanted to be that role model, come out and possibly do that. And I think so far, so good. I've been successful in it, and I'm hoping to keep continuing.
Named after the first ever British Asian professional footballer, the Sash Raymond Foundation is combating cultural and religious barriers and working towards nurturing the next rising star.
The Sash Raymond Foundation was a non-profit charity formed in 2010. We're funded by the Premier League and the PFA. The aim and objective of the foundation is simply to try and help more Asian people break through into football, whether it is playing, coaching, physiotherapy, medicine. We know that it's difficult for Asians to get a chance in football in any capacity, so the Sash Raymond Foundation tries to break those barriers and give young Asian people a chance to make a name for themselves in the game of football. The impact that I've seen is a positive impact. We currently have coaches working at football clubs such as Fulham Foundation, where I myself work, Chelsea, Crystal Palace, MK Dons, West Bromwich Albion, Brentford. We also have players that we've recommended, Asian players, young Asian players that we recommended to trials. We heavily support the Chelsea Asian Star event, which we're in partnership with. So the impact that we've been doing has been slow, as to be expected, but it's been a positive one.
With continued support from the Football Association, grassroots academies such as Jamil's J3 Academy and the ZR Foundation, and most importantly the family support, it can only be a matter of time before we all read about the next Asian footballer playing professionally at the highest level and sitting amongst the best footballers in the world.